Hi everybody, it's Becky from Icing on Top Becky's Cakes, and today we're going to make traditional American buttercream. Now there are many different kinds of buttercreams, and this is the one that is most frequently used in the US. It is often known as the sweetest buttercream, but my particular recipe, which is the one I'm showing you today, I cut the sweetness with some salt, and that adds a perfect balance and is a very yummy buttercream. And so I'll show you how I do that. A lot of buttercream recipes, I noticed they leave off the salt, so then you're just gonna have just sweetness and it's like whoosh. But anyway, I cut it with the salt and I think it brings the perfect balance to this, and I definitely get really great reviews on this one. So let's begin by discussing the ingredients that I'm going to use for this buttercream. You'll need 1 pound of unsalted butter, and it needs to be room temperature, and that's very important because you want to be at the right temperature. And then we're going to have 2 pounds of confectioner sugar, and that's a pure cane confectioner sugar, and that makes the difference in how gritty it is. So make sure that your confectioner sugar says pure cane. And then we have almond extract, vanilla. I'm just using imitation. You can use some really great vanilla that you can make from homemade too, but I'm just using the store-bought. Or you can use a clear vanilla extract if you want it to make sure that your buttercream's even more white. If you use a clear vanilla extract, that will help. Now, as you saw, I used unsalted butter because I'm adding my own salt, and I like to make sure that it's always the same every time. So that's why I always get unsalted butter, but I add my own salt and I put it in a separate bowl because we want to dissolve that salt so that we don't have spotting later if we color our buttercream. So I'm going to put 2 tablespoons of milk in that 1 teaspoon of salt. So we're going to mix that together so that it will dissolve. We're going to go ahead and add our room temperature butter. You can tell by when you press it down. Does it press down pretty easily? Then it's room temperature if it does. But you don't want it melted though. So we're just going to put that directly in our mixer with our paddle attachment, and we're going to just whip that up on medium-high until that butter starts to look white. When it starts to turn from yellow to white, you know that it's being beat well. And yes, you can do this with a hand mixer as well. Just at the end, you're gonna want to smooth it out with a spatula to beat out and work out those air bubbles that will incorporate when you use something other than a paddle attachment. The paddle attachment helps to get out some of the bubbles and kind of smooth them out as you go, because you're gonna get a lot of air bubbles because of how much you have to mix this. So right now we are beating the butter on a medium-high. But later when we add our other ingredients, our powdered sugar and stuff, we're gonna wanna bring it down to a low. And the reason I do it on low until everything's incorporated is because if you have it on a higher level, you're beating in that air, and then it's gonna work against you when you're trying to smooth it on a cake or you're trying to pipe it out. You're gonna see those air bubbles. It's not gonna look all silky smooth. A lot of ways to treat that is just by beating it down with your spatula at the end, or trying not to whip as much air bubbles into it once you add your powdered sugar. Once it starts to look lighter, we're going to scrape down the sides, and then we're going to go ahead and start adding our confectioner sugar, and we're going to add it in portions, maybe a cup at a time. I just kind of pour in and see how it incorporates, and then scraping the sides as I do that each time. So here's my powdered sugar, and I'm pouring straight from the bag because it's not very humid here. If you're in a more humid climate, or if you notice that you have a lot of lumps in your confectioner sugar that aren't gonna easily be beat out with your paddle attachment, you're gonna wanna sift it beforehand. Otherwise, you're gonna get lumps in your buttercream. So if you see that there's already clumps in your powdered sugar, go ahead and sift that before even trying to add it. We've worked in all our confectioner sugar. I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract or imitation vanilla. Again, if you use the clear vanilla, it's going to help you keep this buttercream from being quite as dark, but I'll also give you a little trick at the end that you can do to make that buttercream look white. And I like to add 1/4 teaspoon of the almond extract. It's a very strong flavor, that's why you only add 1/4, but it's a really good flavor. This does make all the difference. Like, it's definitely worth the purchase. You don't have to get a giant bottle like me, but if you get like even a small bottle, just try it. You'll notice there is quite the difference. Then we'll go ahead and add that milk, those 2 tablespoons of milk that have the salt mixed in it. And here's my little trick, a little dab of, this is a violet gel food coloring. And what it does is it cancels out that yellow that the butter has. It helps cancel that out and give you a white buttercream. But you don't want to do too much or you're going to end up with a pale purple. So you just do a little dab. As you saw, I used a toothpick, and just a little toothpick, take a dab from your gel food coloring, dab it into your buttercream, and look at that, it's already turning a nice white color for me. Now, as you're probably familiar, there's a lot of different ways to make buttercream, but I only mix mine for a couple minutes on low because I don't want to beat too much air into it, because then you're just going to be working against it later when you're smoothing it on a cake. And see, there's not too many air bubbles here, and that's great for piping or putting on a cake. Now, this recipe is enough for about 2 dozen cupcakes, maybe a really small 6-inch cake, but you're gonna wanna double that or triple even if you're doing a larger order. But if you see, this is my 1M Wilton tip that I have in my bag, and it just pipes on beautifully. I love this buttercream. People love the taste of it, so there's a win-win. But if you're looking for a less sweet buttercream, you can check out my Italian meringue buttercream recipe, and that one is a less sweet one. Tastes like Swiss meringue as well. They're basically the same thing, only you cook them differently. And so both really great recipes. If you also notice, the one that I use the most frequently on my channel is my mock American Buttercream. It's made with a high ratio shortening instead of butter, and it holds up really well in the heat and really well to piping. So if you're into a lot more piping, or if you're in a hotter climate, you might want to check that one out. But it is the one I most frequently use, and it also has amazing flavor. And again, I get raving reviews about that one too, so I love the buttercream. So please check that out if you like. Thanks for joining me today, and let's add some sprinkles to these cupcakes and get to eating. Please subscribe to my channel.